Hey everybody, welcome to Ballers and Briefs. I'm Cody Coleman, Pride _69. This is Phil, DSF Phil, and Brad B-Rad Kill. We're out here. We're talking a daily fantasy and getting everybody ready and hyped for the game, Kansas City versus Detroit on Thursday night. So we're going to talk a little bit, trying to get Phil's expertise into daily fantasy and how it's going to affect us across the full season. And Brad and I are in here to give you guys some season-long tips to how to get you a championship win for this year. So I'm going to let Phil kick it off and give us a little tour of how he plans to attack the daily fantasy for this season. And take it away, brother.
Thank you, Cody. Yeah, just as Cody said, I'll be your daily fantasy guy, whether that's DraftKings or FanDuel. There's two very different apps there for fantasy sports that happen weekly. I can give insight on players to fade, players that you must have, matchups, over-unders, basically getting you ready to make money all season long on those type of apps. Cody and Brad will definitely be your guy on season long. I'll have little insight here and there on some plays you might want to make in your season long because of the matchup for that specific week, but for bigger picture purposes, they are the go-to.
So Phil, with that being said, what is the best strategy when it comes into playing a daily fantasy, and how do you use that to make your success and the success that you've had in the past?
So what comes with that is DraftKings versus FanDuel. Those are the two I'll be focusing on. You first have to understand the difference between the two and why they are different. And the big picture, and it's very simple, is one is PPR and one is not. One's half PPR. DraftKings is PPR, meaning you are getting points for every reception. And FanDuel is half PPR, means you're only getting a half a point in scoring per reception. Now, that means you want to change your focus on players. On DraftKings, you do care who scores the ball, but it's not the big picture. It's who's getting the ball more than the other people. Who's getting 15 catches a game, or 15 targets a game, 8 catches a game, versus, your Jamal Williams who steals a touchdown from DeAndre. That's not your guy on DraftKings. That's your guy on FanDuel, because FanDuel, you want touchdowns. Who's gonna do the goal line steals on the rushing touchdowns, or who's gonna be getting all the passing touchdowns versus who's moving the ball downfield. Those are your big differences. I can help address those, but there's also a lot more focus. You want to know, ownership projections as well. If you're entering these contests on DraftKings and FanDuel where there are 5,000 plus entrants, then you got to be different, and that's where we talk about chalk versus contrarian. And your chalk players are the type of player that like everybody's on, like Derrick Henry versus the worst rush defense in the league. When people see that, everybody under the sun is putting Derrick Henry in their lineup. But if you want to win that tournament, that's not necessarily the smart move. I mean, sometimes you have to still do it, but for the most part, it's easier to hope Derrick Henry doesn't do good in that game than it is to hope he does good. Because if he does good and 80% of the people have drafted him, you haven't moved up. You're not making more money. Everybody's tied. You're tied with everybody. So, I mean, there's times where you can still have him and get different somewhere else. But for the most part, you want to avoid situations like that. You want to be different. The contrarian approach. Like, for example, a wide receiver 2 on Derrick Henry's team, right? Because if Derrick Henry's not doing well, someone else is, right? Someone's catching the ball for touchdowns. And in that aspect, that's how you get different and win the money. And that's how you see people win that $1 million tournament every week on DraftKings and FanDuel. That's how you see them win the Showdown Millionaire on Thursdays and Monday Nights Football. And you got to get that mindset going. I can definitely help people get that mindset going and kind of show the ownership interest that I know, and that I use certain tools online to show me projected ownerships, certain projections for each player. And with that information, there's a key to becoming successful on daily sports, and I can help with that.
Cool. So awesome. With that being said, Brad, you have questions for Phil? Like, because I know that you haven't done a whole lot of daily fantasy, if any at all. So I figured
I'm over
that
here kind of
coming out-
jotting notes a little bit. I'm jotting
coming
down
new
notes a
from
little bit. I
questions
won't
that-
lie. It is
that
definitely
you would have
some
directly
new
for him.
information. I know that when you started off, you were saying that you were sort of looking for, I like to call them the Wes Welker types, the type of receiver that's going to get you, you know, multiple targets and multiple receptions, 7 receptions, even more relatively recent Cooper Kupp, and the type of target share, and just to kind of get a better understanding of what type of receivers did you see, for instance, last year that really had a larger impact in the type of leagues that you're saying, in the type of daily fantasy play.
Yeah, you definitely nailed one with Cooper Kupp there. He's your type that he kind of, it breaks the barrier between FanDuel and DraftKings because he's viable in both. He's getting all the catches, he's getting all the yards, boom, DraftKings. But then he's also getting touchdowns. So there's your FanDuel pickup. You got people like Smith for the Eagles. I mean, he was getting more targets and more receptions every game than AJ Brown, but maybe like 1 or 2. And he was just an absolute DraftKings star last season. I'm going to be riding the wave on him this season and hoping that it returns a favor. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Travis Kelce, they were all monsters for DFS purposes every week, drafting people like that. I mean, there are some sleepers every week. You know, sometimes you'll look and be like, who drafted that guy? Or why would they draft that guy? And, you know, that was just somebody trying to get different, right? They were fading your Cooper Kupp and picking, you know, like a 4th string wide receiver on the team, and that person was getting the touchdown. And then that's how they were winning. But for the most part, I think, you know, we'll have an exciting season here. I know there's some new rookies that came out of college that or first rounders or high draft picks that are actually starting for their team. I know there's one that we'll be talking about coming up for the Kansas City and Detroit game, but you got to weigh that same focus with, when you're talking daily fantasy, you got to weigh that focus with that game, who they're facing, you know, the pressure they're going to be doing, because not every week is Cooper Kupp going to pop off again this year, right? He's had his shine. Like, people are going to be watching him. They're going to be learning ways to cover him. I think they already started picking up on that at the end of last season. But
and he's hurt. He's hurt right now anyway. So
he's hurt right now.
There's other people like Smith that I'm talking about for the Eagles. Like, he might be one that it just doesn't shine this year because people, you know, have called on to the way he runs routes, how he runs routes, you know, how Hurts manages to get him the ball all the time. I mean, but that's still your main focus because, you know, to me, that's next level.
Do you favor, I know you said in DraftKings and FanDuel, but do you favor like running style quarterbacks as to passing style quarterbacks? So like your Lamar Jackson's, Jalen Hurts, guys that, you know, Josh Allen for that matter, who's going to bulldoze into the end zone, or your Joe Burrows and try to stack him with the Jamar Chase. I mean, Brad is the king of the stack when it comes to league fantasy. So, I mean, I know that we always try to get into stacks in daily fantasy every once in a while if you can. So can you talk a little bit about how you look into quarterbacks and stacking wide receivers or running backs with the quarterback?
DraftKings, you absolutely want that running quarterback. I mean, it goes without being said, and that also ties into Brad's stacks, right? In daily fantasy football, you absolutely want to stack players. You want to stack a quarterback with a receiver or a tight end, but there are some quarterbacks in some games where you don't need to stack, and those are those running quarterbacks. You know, that's Hurts. You know, that's Tua Tag. That's sometimes Mahomes. So sometimes Mahomes will throw 6 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. He'll run one in, and they all don't go to Kelce. You know, one's going to Kelce. You know, one's going to another player. One's going in, or 2 going in with the running back. And it's just points all across the board. But guess who's feeding on that? Quarterback, right? So you want to focus certain quarterbacks for certain things. Now, for FanDuel, you don't want that rushing quarterback. You don't get as many points for that rushing quarterback, you know, running for 40, 50 yards. You definitely want that stand in the pocket, you know, passer. Joe Burrow stack is marvelous. It definitely made me some money last year. It's definitely a big difference the way you want to approach it. And that's also going to be said with week by week on how to pick your quarterback, right? And I think that ties a lot into the over-unders for certain games. I'll look at Vegas lines all the time and help me pick, how I'm going to target a quarterback. If I look at an over-under for a game and see that it's like 39, 40 points, I don't want either one of those quarterbacks. I mean, and all the time, a 39, 40-point game could be a 60-point game. But most of the time, Vegas is spot on with their over-unders or the way a game should be played. And I don't want either one of those quarterbacks. I don't care if it's Mahomes. Yeah, exactly. I don't care if it's Mahomes. Like,
they wrote the script. Yeah. They wrote the script already.
They wrote the script already, and it's done. Like, I'll just follow them as a guide, right? And then sometimes you can, pick that quarterback and that 40-point over-under because you're trying to be different. But you have to expect a loss when you do that rather than expecting, like, oh, you can't be upset when it didn't work out, in other words. You have to be expecting that you're trying something different, and the reason you're trying something different is because if it hits, you're the only one, right? And you're gonna hit big. You're gonna be ahead of everybody else. So that's the foundation behind it.
Okay. Great. And just to follow up, I know you were saying also earlier when you began about sort of finding that running back that may not necessarily be, necessarily that Derrick Henry style. Running back, sort of that, because everyone's going to pick Derrick Henry. And so can you kind of provide some examples of sort of running backs that were kind of your mid-tier running backs that you were able to find success with last year?
Najee Harris, definitely, he gets the ball so much, or he did get the ball so much, that goes into that DraftKings talk where I'll talk about PPR. Like, you want somebody that's always getting the ball, and if somebody's always getting the ball, that's who you want. So, Derrick Henry, I wouldn't say he gets the ball as much as somebody like Najee Harris, but when he gets it, he just excels with it, right? So he's getting an average of like 7-8 yards, or he's getting touchdowns.
You're looking for those. I remember last year. And I referred to last year as we've been playing, Phil, like Brad and I've been playing like league fantasy together for close to 7 or 8 years now. And Phil, we've been playing daily fantasy together for about 5 or 6 years. I know last year we would be on the Tony Pollards and the ETNs of the world, these type guys that they may not necessarily, they may have a bruiser back with them on the team, but they're always looking for that dump off. They're looking for that dump off because that's a reception right there, and then they're going to take it for 20 yards. So he plays in it. That's for DraftKings purposes, and then you're having to go straight against the grain when you have when you're in for last year, for example, for DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams pairing in Detroit, you got DeAndre Swift dump offs, but Jamal Williams is dogging touchdowns at the goal line, or inside the 20 in the red zone, So it made
Swift useless on DraftKings. I'm not gonna lie, He did not get enough from his usage because at some point it wasn't extreme usage no more for him. It was a split usage, and all the touchdowns were going to Williams, none to him. So it's like he burned me so many times last year. It got to a point where I stopped using him. But for me, when I look away from somebody like Derrick Henry or something, I'll first look to ownership. It's not going to be looking at, who's the next type of Derrick Henry that people aren't on, like Nick Chubb or Eckler. Not another. It doesn't necessarily have to be a big name. It's more about where's the ownership going, right? If there's 70% on Derrick Henry and then there's still 60% on Dalvin Cook, I'm not just going to go from Henry to Cook. I'm going to ignore both of them. Like, I don't need either one of y'all. I'm going to start looking down the list at like a 10 or 15% ownership. See if it's a running back my next look is to see if it's a running back that gets volume. Are you getting volume or not? If I'm thinking DraftKings. If I'm thinking FanDuel, is it a running back that can get me touchdowns? Is it likely that this team will get down to the goal line a lot? And is he going to be the one getting the ball? And then that's how I'll fade off to a different running back. He mentioned ETN too. Josh Jacobs was huge. Yeah. Christian McCaffrey, not so much as you would think. And the reason I say that is because of his price point. You also have to factor in the price. So you got people like Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, and Dalvin Cook are going to be like $10,000 players on the salary for DraftKings.
That's going to take up more of the pot.
It's huge. Okay. So when you're looking at winning a tournament on DraftKings or FanDuel, you're looking at getting at least 4 times plus value on their salary. So if a player is 10,000, you need them to get 40 points. I mean, Christian McCaffrey might have popped off. He might have got 28 fantasy points in season long. That's good. That's all day. But in $1 million contest, that's not winning.
It's like in our house, Brad. It's like ADP when we do annual draft positioning with depending on like that list of running backs that we looked at when we did drafts, and you have in your draft room, you have the Christian McCaffreys, the Eckler, the Josh Jacobs, those dudes every week. Those guys are going to be priced as premium players every week, every time. Like Phil's saying, are they going to pop off at premium price every week? They're never going to match their value. I mean, but sometimes there's some of those guys you got to throw in there just because that's what I was. They're going to be. They're going to be the guy that when you fall down, they're the guy that's going to get you into the end zone regardless, or get you that extra 100 yards.
It's literally situational. It's going to come down to that game. Like, can I fade Derrick Henry here? Or can I fade Christian McCaffrey here? And you really have to look at all options and see what's available. I mean, if it's a showdown, like if you're talking Sunday Night Football and you're doing a showdown contest, this is like an alternative, answer here. I mean, you could go both ways. You could say, I want to do 150 lineups in a 150 max tournament, and I'm going to include 0 Christian McCaffrey. That's taking a step, right? That's taking a huge step. If Christian McCaffrey does not, in those type of contests, he don't need to get 4x, 5x value. He just needs to be the highest scoring running back because he's the highest priced running back. But I'd much rather sometimes fade him. Why? Because he has to be the highest scoring running back. And that's basically saying that these other guys on showdown don't have a chance at passing him. And I think they always do because it's showdown, right? And these Sunday night games, these Thursday night games, I feel like, and y'all might agree, I feel like coaches try to highlight backups for trade purposes. They'll give all the touchdowns to this third string or this second string guy because they're trying to showcase him for trade potentials and, mid-season stuff that they got going on. And it's like, it happens often.
How many times I've seen you fade Christian McCaffrey for Elijah Mitchell? I think I wanted to throw my headset and phone in the trash because it was like, why are you doing that? And you're like, watch. And some 50, I would say 75% of the time you are right. I mean, because I might have Christian McCaffrey and he provides value, but that one touchdown that Elijah Mitchell stole from him screwed the whole pot up because that dude hawked the touchdown when you didn't want him to. You wanted it to go to McCaffrey, and then Kyle Shanahan trots his ass out, trots Elijah Mitchell's ass out there, or Kyle Juszczyk, the freaking fullback, and he runs in a touchdown from the 3-yard line, and that should have been a Christian McCaffrey 7 easy points or 6 easy points.
And that'll lead me into something else too, right? Because he just mentioned in those lineups, if you did not have Elijah Mitchell, you didn't get first place. I can tell you that now. And that's why fading Christian McCaffrey is huge sometimes in that situation, because you can get exposure now to all these weird people like he's mentioning, Juszczyk, who always gets a handoff touchdown down there at the goal line. And it's like, if you don't have exposure to him because you put all your eggs in Christian McCaffrey because it's a showdown and he's the best player on the team and you got to have him and that's all you're looking at, it's so much easier to say, if I can save myself $10,000 and allocate that money somewhere else in the lineup to all these different people, a few pump plays like Juszczyk mixed with a couple of better wide receivers.
Brandon Ayuk.
Now I'm different, right? And my money is valued. So now there's value being put into play, and I much rather have value. It's the same thing as sports betting. I don't want to, bet $1,000 on the best team beating the worst team only to win 100. There's no value there. I'd rather bet 100 on the worst team and hope that they won, because if they did, I'm paid, right? So that's the kind of way I weigh my DFS lineups. Because sometimes you can't always do that, but there's a good way to channel the two, right? You can separate your lineups into what we call GPP versus cash lineups, which will take us
exactly
into
where I was about to ask. That's
another conversation. So your GPP contests are your guaranteed prize pools. They're the ones that have 300,000 people in them, 10,000 people in them. They're the giant prize pools, $1 million the first every Sunday. They got a lot of people in them. And your chances at winning them are low. And they're even lower if you're picking all the chalky players, all the players that everybody's on. You're definitely not winning that tournament. So a way to balance your portfolio, or the way to stay positive, or the way to stay growing your income, is to do some off-the-wall lineups, like I mentioned, where you're fading Christian McCaffrey, you're fading Jalen Hurts, you're fading these stars, and you're putting in all these bums and hoping to win those. And your chance of winning those is low because you're doing that, but you can't expect, if it hits, you're getting big paid, right? But a way to back your money up is to play those chalky players in what we call cash lineups. Your cash lineups are your double ups or your head-to-heads,
50-50s.
50-50s, right? Okay. In those lineups, you want to be chalky. You don't want to fade Derrick Henry. You don't want to fade Jalen Hurts. You want to put the highest owned players that are most likely to pop off in those, and just all you gotta do is beat out half the crowd and double your money. So what you want to do is, if you're gonna enter $100 in, crazy GPP lineups, you might as well do another $100 in cash lineups where you don't fade any of those chalk players. Now, if you being tricky and contrarian doesn't pay off and you lose that $100, at least you won the double ups and now you have your money back. So you didn't lose anything. Gotcha. It's a free gamble. In other words, you're gambling with house money. So that's the way I like to do it. Now, there are some people that might take that information from me and be like, why do GPP at all? You don't have to. Just double your money every week. You'll be successful. You'll be successful majority of the weeks in DFS football, listening to us talk about the chalky plays and playing all of them in your lineups and doing a double up. You make money every week.
They start like $1, like $1, $2 plays up to like $200 plays, I think.
A good strategy that you could do too is on DraftKings, you can do $1 heads ups, and you can do 50 of them. That's $50, and you can select an option at the bottom that you don't have the same opponent in any one of those lineups. So it's something I do every week. And the reason I do that is because the pros on DraftKings and FanDuel cannot join $5 or below tournaments. So you won't face any pros, and you won't face the same person who's like a shark, like one of us, in there capturing all your money. So you just do 50 heads ups, all different opponents. They lock in. It's
a tried and true formula. Guaranteed. I can tell you for a fact. It's tried and true. It does work, especially to cover for somebody like me that can't get out of the league long mindset. Like, it's so hard to get out of the league long mindset, because in a league long, we are that cash chalk ass lineup. We are, because we pick those players. That's what you're looking for is chalk. It's chalk players. And so that kind of leads into some of those garbage trades that we've been getting in our league play, where dudes are like, oh, this guy is going to pop off. Maybe. I mean, you picked up this Jahan Dotson, and Terry McLaurin is hurt, but so Jahan Dotson might be the number one eventually. So he's going to be that guy that's going to shark catches and touchdowns at the end zone. But you're still really not ready to play him as a number one yet. So he's not a chalk yet. But he's going to be chalk after week two. After Sam Howell finally figures out, okay, this is where I'm going to throw to every week, he's chalk. He's eventually chalk. And that's what we want as a league fantasy player. But as a daily fantasy in a GPP tournament, you don't want that guy that you know is going to get the ball. You want someone like, for instance, a couple years ago, that Chase Claypool, unknown garbage guy. Nobody knew about him. Cost Phil $100,000. I told him play Chase Claypool, and he's like, "Who the hell is Chase Claypool?" And he's like, "I already locked my lineup in, and it is kickoff, right? We're going along. I play Chase Claypool, And what happens? Chase Claypool goes off for like 3 touchdowns that day and cost Phil $100,000.
Yeah,
So
I was in
yeah,
first place for $100,000 all day. I had a contrarian lineup. That was a lineup I played Brandon Cooks in that nobody was on. I had Todd Gurley in there that nobody was on. He wasn't even like the star at that time, and it ended up pushing me down to third place, making 20,000. But 100,000 was mine all day if Chase Claypool doesn't catch that 4th touchdown. But he's right. That's see what won, right? Nobody's on Chase Claypool. Cody had a good contrarian play. I avoided it because I liked my lineup, but I can't complain. You know, 20,000 came off $100.
It's that with that stuff like that insider knowledge when you and I are like don't know what the fuck else is going on, Brad. We're sitting here texting back and forth, and we're like, hey, what do you think about this guy? Or remember this guy in college? You remember watching him in college? Was he any good?
All the time.
Like a Dalton Kincaid or this Michael Meyer, some of these tight ends that's going to come in and end up getting instant gratification. And or you know what I'm saying? Or for the Bears, is Chase Claypool going to be that guy, that third receiver behind Mooney and DJ Moore, because DJ Moore is going to be the chalk. So
I think about Jordan Addison. This year, as far as for that player that maybe won't cost as much in your daily fantasy, but theoretically, will potentially have a type of game. Certain games will lend to a better coverage scenario where he could potentially go off that week.
Well, he's probably going to be. What do you think he's starting out? He's probably listed as what, fourth on the depth chart as in pass catching range, probably behind Jay Jetta, and then you have Hawkinson at number 2. And KJ Osborne, maybe the 3rd, and then Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison has that space to move into the third option for Kirk Cousins coming out of the slot. Maybe I don't even really know, because that's Jefferson's area out of the slot. But I mean, Kirk Cousins.
Just trying to think about guys that potentially could have, based off of what we've been saying in the conversation, what I've been hearing in the conversation. About guys that, again, kind of not necessarily off the radar, but won't command a lot of money when it comes to basically picking them.
The rookies probably week 1, especially the ones that weren't picked in the first round. They're going to be lower end price points, but other on the high end of chance of going off, kind of. You want that guy that's going to go off. You don't want that guy that is going to have a productive day just from the fact that he had a productive day last week. You want that who's going to go off this week? Who is Patrick Mahomes going to look for? Is this going to be a Sky Moore week? Is this going to be a Rashid Rice type week with the new guy in Kansas City? But we know that it's going to be a Travis Kelce week, because there's a Travis Kelce week every week. Every week. So is it going to be a Travis Kelce week enough to, like it is when he plays the Raiders, which it always seems to be Travis Kelce's week when he plays the Raiders. But we know Travis Kelce is going to be Travis Kelce for the other 16 or 17 games of the season, or even into the playoffs, because DraftKings is all the way through the playoffs and up to the Super Bowl. So that's the thing. So
it's definitely going to be like you're thinking about. It's definitely going to be somebody that takes. It's going to be a rookie that's taken the touchdowns from somebody like a Justin Jefferson that wins that Millie Maker, especially on week 1. When you're looking at week 1, week 1 and week 2 are probably the hardest to predict weeks in daily fantasy and probably season-long fantasy. But by week 3, you should have a game plan of what to expect. I mean, I'll have tools that can tell me, the amount of time that a certain player's on the field, their snaps versus the other person's snaps, their air yardage share, their average, catch down field distance, all that. So by that time, it gets a little easier. But for week 1, I mean, I would expect to see, if you're doing daily fantasy, I would expect to see maybe 2 or 3 what we call punt plays in that Millie Maker winning lineup. It's just going to be so hard to pick who's doing it. I can tell you right now, it's not going to be your chalk. Justin Jefferson and them, it's probably going to be, like you said, somebody that comes in and takes those from him, especially because you gotta think as a team that's playing them, right? What is your goal? It's to shut down Justin Jefferson, right? If your goal is to shut down Justin Jefferson and you do that, someone else got to be doing something.
Has to get some production.
To be doing something. So they're going to be getting you that production. They're also only going to be like a $3,000 salary on DraftKings versus the $9,800 or $10,000 that Justin Jefferson is every week. And that's where you get your value, because now a $3,000 player only needs to get you 12 to 15 points and you win. Gotcha. So, you know,
Phil, can you do a little breakdown? Can you do a little breakdown on as like for a multi-game slate, like a main slate versus a showdown difference? Because for the viewers that might not know exactly the difference, so in case like you have for a multi-game, which is more along the lines of like league long fantasy type, your multiple running backs, multiple wide receivers, tight end, flex, defense minus a kicker, but your showdowns kicker is available. So can you kind of give a little bit of a difference, a little bit of a rundown on exactly how that difference is?
Correct. So when we're going to be talking multi-game slates, we're going to be talking the main slate, or I'm going to be talking the main slate every week when it comes to Sunday football. The main slate's all the 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock games. Does not include an 8 p.m. game, and does not include a Thursday night football game. It does not include a Monday night football game. It's just the 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock games. You know, as Cody mentioned, that has, you know, a quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex, and a defense. Versus your showdowns, which are your single games, your Thursday night football, your Sunday night football, your Monday night football. It's just that game. Those don't play like that. Those play an MVP and then like 4 or 5 flexes that can be anything. It can be running backs, tight ends. You can put 3 tight ends in there if you want. I've seen it win. So it's not abnormal. So when you do a showdown lineup, the MVP slot is worth more points. It's 1.5 points now. Okay. For every normal point that they would have scored on PPR is now boosted by 0.5. That's huge. So when you're talking picking that captain, we call it the captain, the MVP. When you're talking picking that captain, you gotta be contrarian. You're not gonna win. I'll tell you right now, one of the guys I followed the most, he's a pro on DraftKings and FanDuel, is a guy named Bobby Wow, and he's won the Millie Maker numerous times. He's not just a one and done lucky, I won the Millie Maker. He's won it numerous times, and he did it on crazy weeks. And one of the times he won it was a showdown week with the Baltimore Ravens, and I think the projected ownerships was like 90% for Lamar Jackson to be drafted, and about 80% of Lamar Jackson to be drafted in that MVP slot. He completely faded Lamar Jackson. Completely faded him. And I don't remember if this was the week or not, but I think it was the week where Lamar Jackson had stomach problems and he went to the bathroom and he missed like a whole quarter, came back, only played, like he hurt his ankle and then sat around and he didn't do nothing. He faded him the perfect week and he won $1 million doing it. And it's like,
okay, I see what you're saying.
You gotta be, you know, you can go into those showdown weeks and still pick your Travis Kelce as your captain and be successful because you're getting that 1.5 boost. But imagine if your $3,000 pump play is your captain and he gets a touchdown or 2. That 1.5 boost is worth so much more on that player than it is on somebody like Kelce. And you're probably wondering why. The reason why is ownership. I just got a boosted 0.5 on every point this guy has scored. No one owns him. So I'm now a 0.5 on the difference in ownership ahead of everybody for every point he scored. So now if he's only owned 1%, 3%, 5%, you got to figure that if he's got 15 points, naturally, that he's probably got about 22.5 points in the captain spot, that I am 22.5 points ahead of 95% of the showdown entrance. That's huge. That's already probably top 10 money right there. That's already looking at, 5-figure income easily just by doing that and being different. It got to a point where I told Cody last year, I was focusing 20 entry maxes on DraftKings. I mean, the most lineups you could put in there is 20 lineups. So most you could put in there. I was doing $3 20 entry maxes, $60 total. It's not even a lot of money. And I was picking 2 captains and putting 10 on one captain, 10 on the other captain. And both captains I were picking were away from the chalk every time. And I remember telling Cody one, and I got paid a lot of money, and it was using the Redskins backup running back. This was before
McKissick.
Brian Robinson. Yeah, J.D. McKissick.
Oh,
I
yeah.
put him as my captain because I tried telling Cody and everybody else on showdown games, that boy eats. Every time he eats. He gets all the touchdowns. He gets just all the balls out the backfield. And then Gibson's just sitting there. And it's like, I told y'all. And I rostered him in 10 of my 20 lineups. And I didn't end up getting first, but I can tell you J.D. McKissick was the nuts captain, meaning the number one captain. The winning lineup that won $1 million had J.D. McKissick in it. He just had maybe 1 or 2 different pump plays that separated him from me, but it was a very successful week doing that. And if you start doing things like that, it could be huge when you're thinking showdown. When you're thinking main slate, you're looking at all the 1 o'clock and all the 4 o'clock games. Now you're looking at things I was talking about earlier, like the over-unders, for example. I don't want to focus on any game that has a low under. Right? I want to look at the games that have the highest potential scoring, games that have 48-point overs, 53-point overs, you know, your big show-out games, your Kansas City versus Eagles games, right? Those are going to be fireworks no matter how you look at it every time they play. And
so I think with that being said, that can kind of lead us into our Thursday night showdown introduction and kind of kickoff, because we have one of the biggest games, especially kickoff games that I've seen, anticipatory games that I've seen in a couple years, with Kansas City's the Super Bowl champions against the Detroit Lions. So I think with that being said, I know, Brad, you, for league purposes, I know you have a couple. You have the Patrick Mahomes, God tier quarterback. So tell me what your thoughts are going into Thursday night. If Patrick Mahomes is gonna spread the ball around, you think it's gonna be the Kelsey show or Isaiah Pacheco show, or what do you think? Like, what are you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things I'm thinking about is that Detroit defense. I know last year they started to sort of peak a little bit with that defensive front line. Aiden Hutchinson was starting to get a lot of pressure, more so towards the end of last year. So what I'm sort of thinking is that Patrick Mahomes and the scheme that they're going to try to put together would be a more so get the ball out of your hands fairly quickly, which would be a nice fit based off of the combination that I'm trying to basically kind of win on in our second league, Cody, where I'm lining up Mahomes with Kadarius Toney. Now, I know there is a little bit of injury concerns with Kadarius Toney, but what I'm hoping for is that he'll get those, those intermediate routes, those short dump off routes. That's going to add into some additional catches, potentially even sort of an end around type play for a touchdown. Looking at that type of thing, and then hoping for Mahomes to be Mahomes in a sense, but understanding that it may not be 3-4 touchdowns. It may just be maybe a 250 and 2 touchdown type game.
That's Phil about his feelings about Kadarius Toney. Phil has feelings about that.
I was already thinking about my dream.
Yeah,
it's random, man. I had the most random dream ever. Was it last season, Cody?
Yeah.
The most random
for the
dream
Super Bowl, I think it was, or middle of the season.
Me and Kadarius Toney were chilling, and it's so random because he's not even somebody that I was drafted that week or anything. I have no idea why I ended up in my dream, but I told Cody, I said, I got to draft Kadarius Toney this weekend. Like, it's a sign. I'm going to win the Millie Maker. And I ended up drafting this solid lineup. My whole lineup did so good. And Kadarius Toney did nothing. And I was like, maybe that was the sign. Don't play him. And ever since then, he did terrible, and then Cody was like, maybe this
Yeah.
is your week to play Kadarius Toney. So I played him a different week. I was like, all right, I'm done with Kadarius Toney. So you can have Kadarius
Can
Toney.
understand.
He
I can understand.
he definitely.
I'm
hurt me
a
on that.
little bit gambling. It's in my flex position that I'm going to be rolling them out, just taking a chance. I feel fairly confident about my two other receivers with Waddle and Samuel. And so I'm kind of trying to, as you always say, sort of that home run pick, sort of that, that Hail Mary pick. If it works out, it's fantastic. If it doesn't necessarily hurt the overall.
I mean, I think it'll work out.
Game.
It just doesn't work out with me. Like, as long as I don't play him, you're good. Like, I think that's actually a good play, a good move. I'm not big on the season long. I used to like season long, but I became hooked on the daily fantasy. I don't get burned by injuries or crazy trades that are happening with inside the leagues, and
I just
keep it.
Brad,
well, that's still a good though, or just to keep going. That's a good sort of pivot as far as for kind of thinking about it from the daily fantasy perspective of, okay, if I'm going into the Lions and the Chiefs game, as we've been basically having this conversation, you've been saying kind of fading the stars. Would you though still go with a Patrick Mahomes and kind of fade more so a Kelsey, or kind of walk me through, I guess, in that scenario?
So
would you?
Yes and no. So later on in the season, I'll have a better grasp on fading somebody like Mahomes and Kelsey.
Okay.
Just based off of how they've been playing and showdowns and stuff like that. But here, week one, I mean, I honestly think if you fade Mahomes or Kelsey or both, that you have a high chance of winning because it's week one and no one's going to do that. So I think in that case, yes. But I think that the big difference and how to get different on this game is going to come down to that running back situation. And, me and Cody talked about this a little bit earlier, and it's the running back situation for the Lions. So you got David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs at running back, right?
Yeah.
Jahmyr Gibbs is priced at $8,200, and David Montgomery is priced at $6,600. Now, the models I use for projections have been projected nearly the same. Actually, they got David Montgomery projected a little bit higher at 11 points and Gibbs at 10 points. But Gibbs is $2,200 more. So I think, the difference is really going to come down to the running back situation for that game. Obviously, everybody's going to be on Kelsey and Mahomes and maybe another pass catcher for the Chiefs. I mean, I wouldn't sleep on the Lions airing it out. They love to air it out. They love to keep up in games they should be getting blown out in. So to be honest, I would much rather make a lineup that favors the Lions over top of the Chiefs. One, because less people are going to be doing it. And two, you usually play up to your competition. And vice versa, they play down, right? So the Chiefs will probably play down and Lions will play up, meaning Lions players will shine at much lower prices than your Kelsey and your Mahomes. Now, considering it's week one, I'll probably be all over the place. I might have a lineup that has Kelsey, Mahomes, and Jared Goff all in it, and then like 3 punt plays that are terrible. And then I might have another lineup that has no Kelsey, no Mahomes, and it's like 5 Lions players and just put like Kadarius Toney at the end. 5 Lions, 1 Chief, because people don't do that neither. They feel imbalanced.
What do you think about Isaiah Pacheco? Is there anything there that you see?
I mean, this is where that it comes down to struggles with it being week one versus later in the season. Is he going to eat more than McKinnon? How are we going to see this? Is McKinnon going to get all the catches, and is Pacheco going to be the one that's getting all the handoffs? Because if that's the case, I want the catches. On DraftKings, you want the catches. That's your points per reception, right? If you get handed off the ball, you don't get points for that. You only get points for the catches. Now, unless that guy's running for 10 yards, then you get a point. But
Yeah.
I mean, McKinnon can catch the ball on the line, not gain a single yard, and get 1 point. Whereas Pacheco can get handed the ball, run for 8 yards, and only get 0.8. He's less than McKinnon. So how are the Chiefs gonna how are they gonna play? Are we gonna be passing the ball to Pacheco too, or are we just gonna be running with Pacheco? If we're just running with Pacheco, I really don't want none of that on DraftKings. I say
Gotcha.
somebody like that
Okay.
for FanDuel because he'll probably get the handoff touchdown if there is one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also when you talk Chiefs, I really don't like running backs on FanDuel when you're talking to Chiefs. I want the pass catchers.
Okay. Gotcha.
I know it's like you're kind of in this situation with both of these teams. They are pass centric with good running back play that like to steal those goal line type situations. Now in the worlds of like back to kind of how tying league and daily fantasy together, I have Equanimous St. Brown, which Equanimous St. Brown in this game is 100% chalk. I would say he's 100% chalk, but he's one of those guys that, like Phil just said, you favor a Detroit maybe 4-2. If you say 4-2, probably Detroit with a Detroit captain over Kansas City, Phil, or maybe a Patrick Mahomes at a captain, like depending on what the projection comes out, but like a 4-2 Lions Kansas City Chiefs split because you got 6 players in the showdown and you leave defense at the door. Leave defense. I mean, I would fade defense to that game probably for, that's just me, my thoughts, but because the simple fact of the matter is this is the first night, we're coming out, big lights, big crowd. NFL wants lots of scoring. Chris Jones doesn't even know if he's going to get on the bus.
He's gonna even
play. And we know that. And with the fact that the Chiefs, I thought about it now that I'm thinking about this, talking this out, that the Chiefs can't stop the run. The Chiefs run defense is garbage. So that leaves it open for Gibbs or Monty to take the lion's share of the points here from someone. So like it's almost, I've seen it, like I know Phil's heard this before and seen this before. We've seen optimals, and when we say optimal, it's the best lineup that they could possibly produce out on the field, where they have had 2 running backs, a wide receiver and a quarterback, or like especially these teams that have a run style running back and a pass catching type running back. So, but we know we've seen in the past with David Montgomery in Chicago, he kind of can do both. But we know from watching college ball, Brad, that Jahmyr Gibbs at Alabama, he was a 3-down back. So like he passed protect, he did catch the ball.
He did a little everything.
He's not your stereotypical Alabama running back that we come to love and see. Like
he has a lot of Alvin Kamara to him.
Yes.
I guess. Now I don't want to. That's a kind of a high bar, but he has that running back style. That toolbox. Can catch it out of the background, but still go in between the tackles.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
That type of toolbox that we have come to accustomed to see work in the NFL.
I will say something on the DFS side that ties into what Cody said, and this is just an option to get different. Cody said, I think you can leave the defenses on the table in this game. And that's what we're all thinking, right? I just said it earlier. The Lions are going to play up. This is going to be a scoring game. Now, what if it's not, right? What if defenses show up? What if there's drop passes? What if, just what if, right? A defense in the captain spot or playing both defenses or, just having a defense in there, you start with 10 points on defense. Yeah. And every sack is a point. Fumbles are 2 points. So interceptions for like a pick six. If there's a pick six, that defense is in the nuts every time, the optimal every time. What if that happens, right? What if Mahomes gets hit while throwing the ball and it goes up and it's near their end and it's a pick six, right? That defense is now in the nuts. So if you want to get different and maybe win this game, that is your different. Defenses in a game where you're not thinking defenses, right? You're thinking this is going to be both teams scoring. You can't stop Mahomes. He's going to score a bunch. You got all these weapons now. And then you got Detroit. Like I said earlier, they like to follow the lead. They will score with you. They just don't win games, right? Because they don't play defense, but they will score right along with you the whole game. And when you look at that, you can already see, based on my conversation and Cody's, that the majority of the people are going to be favoring quarterbacks, pass catchers, all that is going to be a low amount on defense. And then there's going to be an even lower amount of people putting defense in that captain spot, that boosted 1.5 spot. You put the Lions defense in that captain spot, I can tell you right now, it's probably 2%, 3% of people doing that. And if the defense gets a pick 6 or 2 or some sacks and get you 20 points, this the nuts. Can't beat it.
And also in the showdown, for showdown purposes, you have the kickers available, and this game itself is a very viable option, I would think. I mean, we're not getting MVP. You're not getting nuts. I don't think nuts type kickers in this game. They're not Justin Tucker. These guys aren't Justin Tucker, but Riley Patterson and Harrison Butker. And Butker, I mean, they're dudes that are gonna. I mean, I think guaranteed in this game, at least one of them is getting 5 to 7 points, probably, just for the simple fact that no matter how many touchdowns is either going to be scored or how close to field goal range these teams are both going to get down the field on one another. I mean,
now, also tie that in with playing a defense, right? If it's a defensive game, there might be a lot of field goals, and somebody like Harrison Butker is known for putting points in fantasy every week when it comes to kicking field goals. Now, if you got solid defensive game for whatever reason, because it's week 1 or whatnot, your field goal kicker should probably be in a lineup with that defense, just because it makes sense. That they're not getting touchdowns scored on them. They're holding you to field goals. And I tell you right now, you can hold the Chiefs from scoring in a high defensive game touchdowns, but they gonna kick a field goal. Harrison Butker is gonna make that field goal. So I would tie the two together if I'm gonna do anything creative. If I'm gonna play a defense in the MVP slot, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set a rule that if I have such and such defense, that I also include a kicker or Harrison Butker. I like Harrison Butker. I know Cody, mentioned something about the other kicker, Riley Patterson. I don't know much about him. I probably have no interest in him, but I definitely like Butker, and I've seen him in optimal winning lineups on showdowns plenty of times.
Nice. And when you were saying, Phil, earlier about sort of the over-under, kind of looking at the betting lines on the over-under, would you take that in consideration with this upcoming game with the Chiefs and the Lions? Is that something you, as far as for at least maybe even considering to potentially play the defensive option?
Yes, in two aspects. So the over-under for this game is 54.5 points, or that's the last I've seen it at. That's high scoring, right? This is one of those games where you want to focus the scores, the touchdowns, the quarterbacks. There's going to be a lot of scoring, right? That's my focus in a cash lineup, my double up, my head-to-heads. That's going to be my focus. In my GPP, trying to win $1 million, I'm going to try to do a little, I'm not going to do all of them opposite of that, but I'm going to have quite a few where the game doesn't play that way. Because if the game doesn't play that way, there's not a lot of people on a game playing a different way, and I have a higher chance at winning. And that takes me into telling people, sometimes when making these lineups in daily fantasy, you want to play the game out. You want to simulate it in your head. What's an outcome, right? What's a potential outcome? Is there an outcome where Mahomes is held to one passing touchdown and maybe 250 yards, and Pacheco has one ground rushing touchdown and McKinnon has one ground rushing touchdown, or maybe he's the pass catching touchdown that Mahomes throws, and that leaves Kelsey with maybe just a lot of targets, no touchdowns, maybe an easy fade that makes Mahomes a low score, easy fade. That's where your defense is and stuff come into play, and a lot more Lions players come into play. In those situations, if I can play the game out and it ends like that in my head, I'm going to try to make a lineup that plays that way. I'm not going to just be throwing people in there like, okay, I have 8,000 left over, I can afford this player. I don't like doing that. I like to see it played out a certain way in my head before I do it. Now, if I'm doing 150 lineups and 150 max tournament, there's going to be a lot in there that aren't played out in my head. I'm just going to optimize them in an optimizer and put them in based on my exposure. But for purposes of a showdown and 20 max or single entry or double ups, I want to play the game out. I want to see, like Cody said, could this be a field goal kicking game? Could this be a defensive play game? Can this be a pass heavy game? And if all of those answers are yes, if they were to play out that way, who's getting the points? So if it's a defensive game, who's getting the points, right? Running backs, kickers, defenses. That's how defensive games are played out, right? Because there's not a lot of passing going on in big defense games. They're either incomplete, knocked down, sacked, or they're just not throwing touchdowns. So you don't want a lot of pass catchers in that. There's a lot of running that's killing the clock. You want running backs. There's a lot of field goals. You want your field goal kickers. You want the defenses because they're getting sacks, they're getting fumble recoveries, they're getting interceptions, things like that play different. So in that lineup, I want to focus that. And I don't want to mix it, right? You don't want to mix all three of my ideas where you're talking about, this could be defensive and it could be high pace. So in that case, I'm going to put a defense in and I'm going to put Kelsey, Mahomes, Sky Moore. That doesn't work, right? Because now you're combining two different ways the game could play out. You want to separate them and make lineups based on each way the game could be played out. And now if you're right, this lineup's going to get you paid. This one's not, but you're trying to get first, right? You're not in a GPP. You're not trying to get in the money, right? You don't want to be like, at least I entered $50 and I made 51. That's not what you're trying to do in there. You're trying to win. You want that $1 million. You want that 100,000. You want $30,000-$40,000. And the only way to do that is playing the game out in your lineup.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's this a random stat in regard to what you were saying. But kickers wise, Riley Patterson averages about 8.5 points on DraftKings. He did last season, so he's one of those kickers that's got some leg. So, I mean, he averages about the same as Harrison Butker did, or I think it was like 8.3, 8.5, something like that, around what Harrison Butker did last season. I mean, like Harrison Butker missed 7 or 8 games last season with that injury he had. But he's gonna. I think Riley Patterson is one of those guys that's probably a sneaky, just easy grab points off the board type guy. I mean, I know he had a couple games where he scored like 14 or 15 points because he hit like a 52 or 54 yard field goal. So to keep the Lions in the game. So I don't know. I mean, we also know there's somebody else it's just probably worth the money. I would think maybe, especially in either in league or in daily fantasy, Jared Goff. We're all going to sleep on Jared Goff. I think we're all going to sleep on Jared Goff to the end of time. My man threw for over 4,000 yards last season. It's his second season in that offense. And Campbell gets those boys ready to play. So it's just going to be, I think we're going to see who he's going to favorite. If it's going to be the Equanimous St. Brown show, if it's going to be the dump offs to Jahmyr Gibbs, or, I mean, you got Marvin Jones Jr. back in the fold in Detroit. I mean, so I don't really know exactly. I was looking to see who they have as the backup type wide receivers for. So you've got Marvin Jones. He's a second highest price at 6,200. You have the list up, Phil. Oh, Sam Laporta, that tight end, Brad, from where was he from? Iowa.
Is he gonna start? Is he gonna start over Brock?
I would think so. I mean, I felt like they you know what I'm talking about, Brad? Laporta from Sam Laporta.
I was going to say Sam Laporta.
Drafted out of Iowa. Yes. Where did he draft from?
I've got to see it though. I got to see it.
Yeah,
I got to see
it. He's an Iowa tight end. So are we gonna live up to the Iowa tight end?
I trust the pedigree.
The Iowa tight end pedigree. The George Kittles, the Dallas Clarks, the Noah Fants of the world.
The interesting thing is that Goff had Hawkinson, and they got rid of him. And so then that makes me wonder how much
into the same division.
You're gonna
in the same division.
In the same, exactly. So it makes me wonder how much Dan Campbell wants to really utilize the tight ends in that scheme. It seems more like he wants to use the 2 running backs.
He was the tight end. Why wouldn't you want to throw it
3 receivers
to a tight end?
You know, maybe 1 tight end, but it just doesn't seem like maybe it is that Goff just doesn't necessarily look towards the tight ends more so than kind of dumping it off to a running back. And so I would have to see a little bit more from those Detroit tight ends before I would feel comfortable. But kind of going back to Goff, at least with the matchup with the Chiefs, and the fact that even if Chris Jones plays, he hasn't been there. So you can only theoretically see him playing only a handful of snaps. That's the type of game that you could see him potentially going for a high 350 in a shootout battle against Mahomes. They probably lose, but he could theoretically put up 3 to 4 touchdowns.
Now, not to get off topic, we had a question come in about any sneaky plays this week. I think, my sneaky play, it's not necessarily too sneaky, but I definitely want to get some exposure to Sky Moore. He'll probably be who I have a lot of, and Khalif Raymond, if I'm trying to get different, right? Khalif Raymond is somebody that can break the slate that this is going to be the lowest ownership across the board. Sky Moore, is also kind of the same situation. More people are going to be focusing on Kadarius Toney and Kelsey. And, I think Sky Moore fills that role of Tyreek Hill and is going to get this team downfield. And I even think that the models I look at have him projected at more points than somebody like Kadarius Toney. So, for my sneaky play, it's definitely going to be Sky Moore, Khalif Raymond. What's y'all's take on that?
Yeah, I would. 2 that kind of come to mind. One that may not necessarily seem like a sleeper, but at least even in this conversation, we haven't talked about him a lot, is David Montgomery. I know he's switching teams, going from Chicago over to Detroit. But again, I do see a lot of potential for some 1-yard touchdowns. This is that type of game where you could see, maybe only, 10 carries, 40 yards, but 2 touchdowns. Another kind of super sleeper, I would say, is actually Marquez Valdez-Scantling, from the perspective that he's your prototypical sort of boom bust. When it goes really well, it goes really well.
He's your deep threat.
Because he has that deep threat option, and I can kind of see him getting behind that Detroit secondary. Whereas Kadarius Toney, I'm more so looking at him more of that intermediate, 7 to 10 catches type game will be a great game for him. I could see a 70-yard bomb for Marquez Valdez-Scantling, maybe only 3 receptions, but again, 70, 80 yards and a touchdown. So a sleeper pick would be Marquez.
I like that.
My sleeper, I think, is Rashee Rice. He's the top rookie out of SMU there at in Kansas City. I mean, it's a bag of candy there that for Patrick Mahomes at his disposal. I mean, they lose Juju Smith-Schuster, and you have as Phil said, Sky Moore, but Rashee Rice is your prototypical. I mean, 6'1", shifty. I mean, he had a really good really good camp and a really good preseason. So I could see him being that guy that we wanted Sky Moore to be last season, that Rashee Rice could be that guy this season for Kansas City. And then I mean, I'm never going to count out Marvin Jones for Detroit. Marvin Jones has been around the league long enough to know that he's one of those guys that always seems to be in the right place at the right time. I mean, this is his second trip to Detroit. I think that Detroit is a place where he's probably going to end up ending his career. I think probably because that seems to be where he wanted to go back to. But he seems to be just one of those guys that, I mean, it's down in the red zone, inside the 20-yard line. or he still does the. I mean, he's like our age, and he still does the dirty work in the middle of the field when other dudes just aren't afraid to go. They're too afraid to go in there and get it. So I'm thinking like he's gonna use that old man knowledge, OG type knowledge, and it may not be this week, but if we're talking just in general along the whole way, Marvin Jones has got to be one of those guys that he's either going to be that boom guy or that bust guy, but he's the sneakiest of all of them, I think, just because people are going to overlook him because he's so old, and they have Equanimous St. Brown and Khalif Raymond and Josh Reynolds. Oh yeah, Amon-Ra. Yeah, my bad. Yeah, so so it's those type guys that they're going to overlook him because he's just the old guy, right? So
yeah.
To tie into Brad, Brad's picks with the Valdez and the David Montgomery on the DFS side. David Montgomery was huge on the DFS side last year. So, that's where I get confused in this game is because of the Jahmyr Gibbs situation.
I think that's what's holding everybody.
You can't sleep on that Detroit Lions offensive line. That offensive line is the fifth ranked offensive line in the league. So it's not a terrible offensive line, and they love to run the ball.
But this goes to what I was talking about, a problem in week 1, right? That's not going to be a problem in week 5, knowing whether to play Montgomery or Gibbs then, because you're going to know. Week 1, you really don't know. But then also, you mentioned Valdez-Scantling. I mean, he is the exact definition of boom or bust when you're talking daily fantasy, winning the millionaire. He is it, right? You can channel him in the MVP slot. He can catch one pass for 80 yards and a touchdown and break the whole slate wide open. And if you don't got him, you're not winning anything. And if you do got him and you got him in the captain slot, you're literally watching every second, every play. Am I going to win the millie? Am I going to win the millie? 'Cause now it's the rest of your lineup, right? So Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I believe, was in the optimal lineup a couple times last year on showdown slates for Kansas City. He might even have been the MVP in one of them for one of the winning weeks. I mean, he is definitely your boomer bust because it's like you said, he could go out there and get no catches. I mean, he could run those 80-yard passing routes or however you want to say it and not catch the ball, or it be intercepted, or it just be thrown out, out the back and him not do anything. But there's also those weeks where, like you said, he gets behind that defense and one catch. I mean, one catch. He's your type of player. I can tell you right now, he's 5,400 on the showdown compared to Amon-Ra, who's 10,200. Right? This is a good comparison. It's a good time to talk about it. Amon-Ra is 10,200 to draft. He's what you call your safe option. He's going to get the ball. He's going to get you points. He's who you play in your double ups. He is who you fade in the GPP. You want yourself that Valdez-Scantling, who's 5,400, it frees up salaried for you to have a more solid lineup with this one pump play, boomer bust Valdez. Valdez goes out there, he catches that touchdown, he beats the defense, he broke the slate. Now the rest of your lineup is all great value players. There's no weird $2,000 4-string tight end in your lineup, that you're just hoping does good, right? It was Valdez and he did it. And now you're just watching the rest of your lineup to see, am I going to get this millie? Am I going to get this millie? Yeah. And that's how you play into that. And I think, that was a good choice there talking about Valdez because he definitely can do that.
Yeah. So I know that we'll come back here on Thursday night or before kickoff and give a better rundown of what we think will work for plays for DFS, and then drop some waiver wire must-haves for league-long fantasy. So we appreciate everybody listening. Again, I'm Cody. This is Phil and Brad. Follow us on Facebook at Ballers and Briefs, a sports fantasy podcast. We have YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends. We're here, and we're also looking for anybody had questions. I mean, we're here to just chill and talk fantasy sports and help everybody out.
everybody needs to be a winner. I mean, you join that Facebook group, you'll have updates every time we go live, when we're going to go live, what we're going to talk about. You know, if you got something specific you want to know, whether you should start somebody or sit somebody versus starting or sitting somebody else, we can share our input. It might help and our reasons why. You know, as it gets closer to Thursday, I'll have some predictions on ownership percents for certain players, which will help channel if you're doing daily fantasy, whether or not you want to fade somebody because they're going to be high owned or not. I can help give some insight on that. And then, of course, we'll do something later in the week for the main slate on Sunday. Go over the over-unders of each game, where I'm going to be looking at certain games versus, you know, other games, and so forth, certain players versus other players.
Yeah, and then we will, if there's something that you guys want us to watch, we're talking about doing some watch-alongs maybe this season.
Yeah.
I know that Brad and I are big college football fans. Phil's a big Saints fan. I'm a Texans fan. Brad's a Jags fan. So I know this season the AFC South and the NFC South rock one another this season. So we're definitely gonna get a Texans Saints watch along and a Jags Texans watch along and a Saints Jags watch along. So yeah,
you gotta join in.
We just join in. Just cutting up like we're all friends here, and we always want to cultivate the community and help everybody else to try to win big, whether it's their league and make all their friends feel terrible because they got insider information, or if they win those thousands, millions of dollars, and they come back and say, "Hey, I got my championship." Yeah, I got my
that fantasy league championship.
I got my information from Ballers and Breach. So
get that Millie.
Yeah. So thanks for hanging out with us. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Till next time.
Yeah. Later, boys.
Later.